It was late January 2017, and I was just a regular guy living in a small house in a quiet part of Washington state. My name's Jack, I'm 34 years old, married to the love of my life, Sarah, with our 2 kids, Emily, she's 8 years old, and Noah, he's 5 years old. We weren't rich, just your average family, you know, working a 9 to 5 at a hardware store, coming home to dinner, kids' homework, maybe some TV before bed. Life was simple. Until it wasn't. It started on a Wednesday night. A storm had rolled in, one of those Pacific Northwest beasts that knocks out power lines and leaves you scrambling for flashlights. The wind was howling outside, rattling the windows, and the house was pitch black. Sarah was in the living room trying to keep the kids calm with a board game by candlelight. I was in the kitchen digging through drawers for batteries when my cell phone rang. I remember thinking it was weird because the signal out here is spotty even on good days, and with the storm, no way. I picked it up. The screen said unknown number. I answered, figuring it might be the power company or something. Hello, I said, holding the phone to my ear. There was this long pause, just static, and then a voice came through. It was low, scratchy, like someone dragging sandpaper over gravel. Jack, it said, I see you in the kitchen. Nice red flannel shirt. My stomach dropped. I was wearing a red flannel shirt. I looked around, but the kitchen was dark, just the faint glow of a candle on the counter. Who is this? I asked, trying to sound tough, but my voice cracked a little. The voice laughed, this slow, raspy chuckle. I'm watching you, Jack. You're looking for batteries, aren't you? Check the drawer by the sink. I froze. That's exactly where I was standing, right by the sink, rummaging through the junk drawer. My heart was pounding now. Listen, whoever you are, this isn't funny, I said, gripping the phone tighter. The voice got quieter, colder. I'm not here to be funny, Jack. I'm here to slit your throat. The line went dead. I stood there, staring at my phone, my hands shaking. I checked the call log. Nothing. No record of the calls. I told myself it was a prank, some kid messing around, but how did they know what I was wearing? What I was doing? I didn't tell Sarah right away. She was already stressed with the kids and the blackout. I didn't want to scare her. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, in the storm, watching us. The power was still out the next morning, and I was on edge. I kept checking the windows, expecting to see someone standing in the yard, but it was just rain and wind. Sarah noticed I was acting weird, but I brushed it off, said I was just tired. Then around noon, my phone rang again. Same unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. That same scratchy voice. Jack, you didn't sleep much last night, did you? I saw you pacing in the living room at 2 a.m. I felt sick. I had been up at 2 a.m. pacing, thinking about that call. There's no way anyone could have known that unless they were inside the house or watching through the windows. I ran to the front door, locked it, checked every window. Nothing. No footprints, no signs anyone had been there. But the voice knew. It knew too much. That night I told Sarah. Her face went pale and she grabbed the kids, pulling them close. We decided to call the police. They came out, took a report, but they didn't seem too worried. Probably just a prank, the officer said. Kids with too much time on their hands. They checked my phone, but there was no trace of the calls, which was weird because I know they happened. The officer suggested we change our numbers, but that didn't sit right with me. How was this guy getting my number in the first place? And how did he know what I was doing? The next day the power came back on and I thought maybe it was over. Maybe the storm had messed with someone's head and they'd move on. But then Sarah's phone rang. She answered, thinking it was her mom. Her face froze and she dropped the phone. I grabbed it and there was that voice again. Sarah, you look nice in that blue sweater. Tell Jack to stop looking out the windows. It won't help. She was wearing a blue sweater. I'd been checking the windows all morning. This wasn't a prank anymore. This was something else, something personal. We unplugged the landline, turned off our phones, but it didn't matter. The calls kept coming even when the phones were off. I'd pick up, and there it was, that scratchy voice describing what we were doing, what we were wearing, like they were standing right next to us. By the end of the week, we were barely sleeping. The kids were scared, picking up on our fear. Emily kept asking why we were locking the doors all the time. Noah wouldn't sleep alone. I started to wonder if I was losing it. Was I imagining this? But Sarah heard it too. We both did. And then came the confusing part of everything. I was checking my phone's call history one night, trying to figure out how this guy was getting through. I noticed something I hadn't before. The calls weren't just coming from an unknown number. They were coming from my phone. The logs showed outgoing calls to myself at the exact times I'd gotten those creepy voicemails. But my phone was off during the blackout. I hadn't made those calls. Sarah checked her phone, same thing. Calls from her own number when her phone was powered down. I didn't know what to think. Was someone hacking our phones? Cloning them? Or was it something worse, something I couldn't wrap my head around? We were trapped in our own house, jumping at every noise, every shadow. And the worst part? The voice started leaving messages. Jack, I'm closer than you think. Check the basement. I hadn't been in the basement all week. I didn't want to go down there, but I had to know. I grabbed a flashlight and a kitchen knife, told Sarah to stay with the kids, and went down. The basement was cold, damp, just a concrete room with some boxes and old furniture. I checked every corner, every shadow. Nothing. But when I turned to go back upstairs, I saw it. A scratch on the wall, fresh, like someone had dragged a nail across it. It wasn't there before. I'd have noticed. I ran upstairs, locked the basement door, and told Sarah we were leaving. We packed the kids in the car and drove to a motel. But even there, the calls didn't stop. That scratchy voice followed us, describing the motel room, the clothes we were wearing, like it was right there with us. I started to think we'd never get away. We checked into this rundown motel about 20 miles from our house. It was one of those places with flickering neon signs and carpet that smelled like mildew, but it was all we could afford on short notice. Sarah was trying to keep the kids calm, setting up a little area for them to color in the corner of the room. I was pacing, checking the locks on the door and windows every 5 minutes. My phone was off, Sarah's was off, and we'd unplugged the motel's ancient rotary phone. I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd get a break from that voice. But around midnight, the rotary phone rang. It wasn't even plugged in. I stared at it, my heart hammering in my chest. Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide. "Don't answer it," she whispered. But I had to. I picked up the receiver, and there it was, that same scratchy voice. "Jack, the motel's not safe. I see Emily coloring with the red crayon. Noah's asleep on the bed, isn't he?" I dropped the phone like it burned me. Emily was holding a red crayon. Noah was curled up on the bed, out cold. I yanked the phone cord out of the wall, even though it was already unplugged, and checked every inch of the room. No cameras, no bugs, nothing. But that voice knew exactly what was happening. Sarah was crying now, holding the kids tight. I didn't know what to do. The next morning, I went to the motel manager, a grumpy old guy who looked like he'd seen it all. I asked if anyone had access to the room phones, maybe someone messing with the lines. He laughed, said the phones hadn't worked in years, not since they switched to a new system. That made it worse. The phones were dead, how was this guy calling us? We decided to stay at the motel another night, mostly because we had nowhere else to go. I called the police again, but they were even less helpful this time. "You're out of our jurisdiction," the officer said. "File a report with the county." I tried explaining the calls, how they were coming from our own phones, how they knew things they shouldn't. He just told me to get a new phone and hung up. That night, I stayed up, sitting by the door with a baseball bat I'd brought from home. I wasn't going to let anyone get to my family. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. I hadn't turned it on since we got to the motel, but there it was, lit up, vibrating on the nightstand. I grabbed it, and there was a text from my own number, "Look under the bed." I didn't want to look. Every part of me screamed not to, but I had to know. I grabbed the flashlight, got down on my knees, and shined it under the bed. There was nothing there, just dust and a couple of candy wrappers. I let out a breath, thinking maybe it was a bluff. Then I heard Sarah scream. I spun around. She was pointing at the ceiling. There, in the corner, was a small black device no bigger than a quarter stuck to the plaster. It had a tiny red light blinking. Camera. I ripped it down, smashed it with the bat, and searched the room for more. I found 2 others, one in the bathroom, one behind the TV. Someone was watching us, and they'd been watching us the whole time. We left the motel at dawn, piling into the car and driving to my brother's place 2 hours away. I thought maybe distance would help, that whoever this was wouldn't follow us that far. But when we got to my brother's, his phone rang. He answered, then handed it to me, his face pale. "It's for you," he said. That scratchy voice again. "Jack, you can't run. I see you in your brother's living room. Nice green couch." My brother's couch was green. I hung up, told him to unplug his phone, and we sat there in silence trying to figure out what the hell was going on. My brother Mike suggested we get new phones, new numbers, everything. So we did. We drove to a store, bought cheap burner phones, and activated them with new SIM cards. For a few hours it was quiet. No calls, no texts. I started to think maybe we'd outsmarted this guy. Then Mike's new phone rang. It was my new number calling him. I hadn't made the call. I answered and the voice was there. "Jack, new phones won't help. I'm always watching." I threw the phone across the room, shattering it against the wall. Sarah was sobbing, the kids were terrified, and Mike was looking at me like I was crazy. That's when Mike found something that turned everything upside down. He was checking his security system, a little setup with cameras around his house. He pulled up the footage from the night before, and there I was, standing in his backyard at 2 a.m., staring at the house. Except I hadn't left the guest room all night. I was asleep next to Sarah. The footage was clear. My face, my clothes, everything. But it wasn't me. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was someone impersonating me? Was this some kind of setup? Mike didn't know what to think either, but he was starting to look at me differently, like maybe I was the problem. Sarah didn't believe it was me in the footage, but I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. We decided to leave Mike's place, but not before I found a small handwritten note slipped under the guest room door. It said, "Check your car." I didn't want to, but I did. Under the driver's seat, I found a small black box like the cameras from the motel. It was blinking, recording. Someone had been in our car, planting devices, following us, watching us no matter where we went. I smashed it, but I knew it didn't matter. They were always one step ahead. We couldn't go back home, and Mike's place didn't feel safe anymore, so we decided to crash with Sarah's cousin, Lisa, in a small town about an hour away. Lisa was a single mom, lived in a quiet neighborhood, and had a spare room. She didn't ask too many questions when we showed up, just saw how shaken we were and let us in. I didn't tell her everything, just that we were having some trouble and needed a place to stay. I didn't want to drag her into this mess. The first night at Lisa's was quiet. No calls, no texts. I started to think maybe we'd finally gotten away. But I couldn't relax. I kept checking the windows, the doors, the kids. Sarah was barely talking, just holding Noah and Emily like she was afraid they'd disappear. Lisa noticed but didn't push. She just made us coffee and tried to keep things normal for the kids. The next morning, I took the car to a mechanic, thinking maybe there were more devices hidden in it. The guy checked every inch, under the seats, in the trunk, even the wiring. Nothing. He looked at me like I was paranoid, but I didn't care. I needed to be sure. When I got back to Lisa's, she was outside talking to her neighbor, a guy named Tom. He was in his 50s, friendly, the kind of guy who mows your lawn if you're out of town. He waved me over, introduced himself, and asked if everything was okay. I mumbled something about car trouble and left it at that. That night, Lisa's phone rang. She answered, then handed it to me. "It's for you," she said, her voice shaking. I knew what was coming. That scratchy voice. "Jack, you think you're safe at Lisa's? I see you talking to Tom today. Nice guy. Too bad he's not who you think he is." I hung up, my hands trembling. Tom? The neighbor? No way. He seems so normal. But now I was second-guessing everything. I told Sarah and Lisa about the call, and Lisa got this weird look. She said Tom had been acting strange lately, always around, asking questions about us, offering to help with little things. She thought he was just being neighborly, but now she wasn't sure. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Tom, wondering if he was the one behind this. The next day, I watched him from the window. He was outside working on his car, but every so often, he'd glance toward Lisa's house. I decided to confront him, but not directly. I asked Lisa to invite him over for coffee just to feel him out. Tom came over, all smiles, bringing a plate of cookies his wife had made. We sat in the living room making small talk, but I was studying him. His hands, his eyes, the way he talked. He seemed normal, but maybe too normal. Then Emily dropped her juice cup and Tom jumped up to help, moving a little too fast. When he bent down, I saw something fall out of his pocket. A small black device just like the ones from the motel. I froze. Sarah saw it too and grabbed my arm. Tom picked it up quick, said it was a key fob, but I wasn't buying it. After he left, I told Lisa we had to leave. She didn't argue. We packed up and headed to a hotel, but not before I called the police about Tom. They said they'd look into it, but I could tell they weren't taking it seriously. At the hotel, I thought we'd finally get some peace. But then the call started again. This time they weren't just about us. The voice mentioned Lisa, said she shouldn't have let us stay. It described her kitchen, her clothes, even the cookies Tom brought over. I called Lisa to warn her, but her phone was off. I started to panic, thinking maybe Tom was involved, maybe he'd done something to her. We drove back to Lisa's that night against Sarah's protests. When we got there, the house was dark. I told Sarah to stay in the car with the kids and went inside. The place was a mess. Furniture tipped over, dishes broken. Lisa was gone. I called the police, but when they showed up, they found something I wasn't expecting. In Lisa's basement, there was a small setup. A laptop, a burner phone, and a stack of photos. Photos of us. Me at work, Sarah at the grocery store, the kids at school. And there, in the corner, was a voice modulator, the kind that could make your voice sound scratchy. I couldn't believe it. Was Lisa behind this? My head was spinning. She was family. Why would she do this? The police took everything, said they'd track her down, but she was gone. No trace. And then, as we were leaving, my phone buzzed. A text from Lisa's number. "You shouldn't have come back, Jack." I didn't know what to think anymore. Was Lisa the one calling us? Or was someone using her phone, her house, to mess with us? The police were no help, just said to stay vigilant. We went back to the hotel, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being played, that this was bigger than just one person. And the worst part? I found another camera in our hotel room, hidden in the smoke detector. Whoever this was, they weren't done with us. 'Cause what happened next changed everything.